It's Friday, the 22nd of July, 2016. I am Robin Yellow, and this is Techtasm, episode 24, Softbank, Hard Cash. And with me, because nobody else is as hard, is James Woodall.
That is really dodgy. I'm just saying. I'm throwing that.
Well, you're better to be hard than soft,
yeah,
right?
Well, this is very, very true. Very true. Have you been playing Pokemon Go?
I have, actually, very badly. I'm only a level 2.
Yeah, me too. I found 2, and both of them were in my bedroom.
And it's just boring.
Yeah, well, I couldn't log on because of the DDoS. I just couldn't get.
You logged in on DDoS day.
I did well, and then I got bored. So, hey, what can I say? Thanks.
These things happen. Well, listeners, this week, James and I will be looking at SoftBank's acquisition of ARM, Facebook's massive British wing drone, and more Musk madness. And we'll be judging these stories and others to tell you if they are a Techtasm, which is a blend of tech for technology and tasm for phantasm, something that exists only in a person's mind. So without further intro, let's get on with the show. Well, SoftBank's takeover of ARM Holdings is in doubt. Now, if you don't know, James, or you don't remember, SoftBank, the Japanese company, has put in a £24.3 billion offer to buy ARM, the famous chip designer based in Britain. Now, it is Britain's biggest technology company, and the investment could be in doubt after investors in the Japanese group behind the deal, SoftBank, gave it the thumbs down. Now, the acquisition of ARM would be the biggest deal yet for SoftBank, and its charismatic founder, Masayoshi Son. But SoftBank's already had $113 billion of debt, and a fresh acquisition like this is not what the market wants from SoftBank, according to Mitsushige Akino, a chief fund manager at Ikiyoshi Asset Management. And that's what he told Reuters. I'm not sure I pronounced his name right there, but I got this from The Guardian, so from Graham Ruddock in The Guardian, so it must be accurate, James.
Yeah, definitely. ARM, what a great company. I mean, one fantastic business model. Design things, never build them, get paid for them. Brilliant.
Well, their chips apparently power more than 95% of the smartphones around the world, and it is the same technology that powers the A9 chip in the iPhone.
Yeah, I read when Apple acquired PA Semi, who make the A series chips, going back probably 6-7 years now, whenever it was, that PA Semi were one of the very few companies who had a license to build ARM chips from scratch. What most people do is they take an ARM chip and they customize it. But PA Semi were one of the very few companies that can actually build one from scratch. It's an incredible business model.
Well, the proposed deal for ARM gave Theresa May, the new British Prime Minister, a dilemma. Less than a week into her new government, May and Philip Hammond, the new Chancellor, have welcomed the deal as a sign that international investors are still willing to invest in the UK, even after the EU referendum result to leave the European Union. But of course, critics claim that the UK should not give up ownership of one of its few world-leading companies, which it is. It is a world leader, isn't it, James?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's pretty much established that ARM won the smartphone world, while Intel were trailing very, very far behind. So, yeah, they absolutely are a mega company, and I think I probably couldn't even list all the devices that I can see that have an ARM chip.
Well, of course, they're ripe to take advantage of the IoT trend, Internet of Things trend, where there'll be a chip in absolutely everything. Mm-hmm. And of course, what they've said is that they would preserve the UK base for the company, mm-hmm. and they would invest in doubling of the UK staff to support growth.
That's great. Interestingly enough, they are actually attacking a few of the desktop markets as well. You can get an ARM server chip, and
yes, you can, 64-bit.
Yeah, and you can also get a couple of ARM-based PCs as well. So,
well, of course, you can get ARM-based Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm.
As well. And interestingly enough, Android TV, we've had this battle before on this show, but Android TV The original Nexus Player device was powered by an Intel chip, and the new Nexus class device will be powered by an ARM-based design chip from Xiaomi.
Well, I think the thing was that really got them popular was because they focused first on power consumption. Whereas Intel has always, they've come at it from the speed and performance angle, because if you're plugged into the wall, who cares? Whereas ARM have always come from the battery and the low power angle. So I think that's really given them the edge, and it really helps in what it is that they're trying to take advantage of. So
give me efficiency every time, because the cost in running a data center, the cost in running any compute device is power. And the more power efficient you are, the more that you can squeeze out of that chip, the more advantageous, potentially your device is. Your smartphone hasn't got a fan in it. It's nicer to if you've got a laptop with a fan in it, your battery power is going on the screen. Well, you can't get away from that, but it's also going into the fan as well, just to cool the chip. Pop quiz, James.
Yep.
Can you name the previous largest tech takeover of a UK company by a foreign company?
Cadbury springs to mind. But was that tech company? Are you saying chocolate's not tech? Okay.
No.
I don't know.
Outside of Willy Wonka. It was also a Cambridge-based company.
Okay.
It was taken over by HP, and the company was Autonomy.
What did they do?
I don't know. They were subsumed into HP. Some kind of big data analytics nonsense.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah, I've been told.
Well, listen, just as a kind of final, before you call this one, James, shares in ARM have risen sharply since Britain voted for Brexit, because the weakness in sterling obviously boosted the profits of any company that made most of its money from abroad. Because ARM conducts less than 1% of its business in the UK, so actually most of it is licensed to Korean, American, Chinese, the people who make the ARM chips, and tend not to be based in the UK. And that's the beauty of their business model, isn't it? It's all about design and intellect. So do you think this is going to go ahead, or do you think SoftBank, here's the Techtasm, James, SoftBank acquire ARM and it sinks into obscurity like Autonomy?
I think they're too widely known to ever sink into obscurity. The one thing I'd hesitate on is, if you remember going back to when Nestle were acquired, sorry, not Nestle, when Cadbury's were acquired by
Hershey's.
Yes, Kraft Foods. They promised all these investments they were going to put in, and the week after they sort of forgot to do that. So I don't think they'll ever go into obscurity. They're everywhere. However, I am skeptical as to whether or not all this investment in doubling the UK team and so forth will actually happen.
Okie dokie.
So moving on, Facebook. I didn't know this. They bought a little company down in Somerset. So the story from this, from Rory Ketland-Jones of the BBC, and it's nice to see a BBC article with a name on it. The story starts out in a warehouse in Somerset. I mean, you just know it's going to be a good story. So Facebook, thinking back to Google's Project Loom, have got a series of drones that they're testing to bring internet to remote parts of the world. So they've got this idea that if they can get a drone that is solar powered by day and battery powered from the charging at night, they can keep these things up in the air for up to 3 months, providing internet in parts where it's just not feasible to run a cable.
So what does it do? Take photovoltaic power during the day into batteries and then run on battery overnight?
That's the idea, yeah. It's incredible. And they're able to, because of how light the aircraft is, they can travel at as slow as 25 miles an hour. 60,000 feet up, which is absolutely incredible. And the goal is, and what they're basically saying is, there are 1.6 billion active users today who are using Facebook, and they think that there's probably another 1.6 billion people out there who need an internet connection. Now, the cynic in me says, do they really need it for Facebook? But hey, look, if Facebook's paying to do it, then fair play to them. But this is really interesting. And in fact, there's the video on the BBC of the takeoff. And on this sample flight that they did, I think it was out in Arizona, they were originally going to only fly it for 30 seconds. But because it was so successful, they carried it on through to 90 seconds.
90 minutes.
Was it 90 minutes?
It was 90 minutes, yeah. So they extended the flight, I think, on takeoff because it was going so well. Maybe the weather was good or whatever. In any case, they did not go up to 60, 90,000 feet, did they?
No. It wasn't that high at all. They still need to test a few more things. But
I wonder what would happen to the batteries up there. I mean, it must be, what, minus 50? That high at 60 to 90,000 feet?
Yeah,
how do the batteries cope with that temperature?
Well, I don't know. I'm no battery expert, but look, if they can pull this off, that would be fantastic. It'll be interesting to see what Google do now with their Project Loon. So,
well, the vehicle itself looks like a gigantic thin wing without an aircraft in the middle of it.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And look, I have
with
to
sort
say,
of propellers on it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's propeller driven.
Big up the British. It's fantastic that it's come from a warehouse in Somerset.
A warehouse in Somerset. It's a total Techtasm, though, don't you think?
No, if we're defining Techtasm as will it actually work, I think this has got some potential, you know?
No, I think it's a load of old rubbish. I think it's part of their PR budget. Let's face it, if it came from Somerset, it probably didn't cost much. Yes, it worked. And, no, I don't think they would ever do it. I think it's a Techtasm. I'll tell you why. Because if one of these things fell out of the sky, landed in a populated area, there's going to be blood on the street, isn't there? And Facebook's brand would not like that. So
yeah, true. But I think because of the places that they're looking here, there aren't many populated areas. I've just looked, actually. Ascenta, the company in Somerset, was bought by Facebook for 20 million. And if you put that in the context of their global marketing budget, being cynical here, just to lead from what you said, 20 million isn't really a particularly big deal.
They've had 20 million's worth of PR bonus out of this story already. So I think I'm going to call this one a Techtasm, if you don't mind.
I don't at all.
Well, Forbes reported on July the 12th, Tony Bradley, that Microsoft are redefining the acronym SaaS, SaaS. You know what that stands for?
Today, it's known as Software as a Service, but I think you may change this.
Surface as a Service.
That is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Surface as a Service.
As a service. And, of course, the Surface refers to the Microsoft Surface tablet.
Yeah.
Now, they unveiled this news at its worldwide partner conference in Toronto. The Surface line of tablet hybrid computers will be offered as a subscription service through Microsoft's cloud solution providers. Now, what's fascinating about this is they've taken a piece of hardware and said you can rent it or license it like a piece of software, which I think is very clever because, if you're the kind of business that needs to kit out 500 people, 1,000 people with a laptop, and you don't want to worry about provisioning it, breakages, capex to buy it, transformation project. You just want to pay a monthly fee and have the thing work, including all the Microsoft suite of software. Seems like a pretty good idea to me.
Yeah, it is. It is really interesting. I guess I'm intrigued to see how they manage to do it on the enterprise level. If there's a way for an IT admin to maybe supply Microsoft with an image or something, and they can, get the devices delivered, ready and able to go.
Well, have you ever used a Microsoft Surface?
Yes, I have. In fact, I have an old Surface RT, and one of the 3 people who bought one.
Oh, did you?
The ARM-based.
Have you still got it?
I do, actually, yes. It's useless. Is
it still working?
Yeah, it does work. Well, the strangest thing about it is they have the Metro UI. I think they call it Modern now, don't they? Where all the apps are on in the App Store. But you have the original Windows UI that we all know and love. The only apps that work in that are Office, and you can't get any other apps that run in that environment. It's a really kind of half measure.
Oh, interesting.
And, hey.
Well, I'm a fan of the idea of being able to use OPEX to pay for things, because it just makes it easier. I pay a monthly rental. I'm running a business. I want to be able to know what my costs are. And if I get into trouble, I want to know how much money I can save by cutting back. And this idea of paying for software on a subscription basis is good for financial planning. And if I can throw all my hardware in there as well, brilliant. And I assume, of course, if they bring out a Surface Pro 5, that I can just upgrade to that without any additional cost.
Well, that would certainly make a lot of sense. Yeah. In fact, interestingly enough, at the office today or yesterday, whenever it was, we were talking about buying a lot of devices for the guys. And it would make a lot more sense if you could have a subscription to phones and smartphones and tablets or whatever, and you don't have to worry about the outlay. So I think if this is successful, I reckon we'll start to see this in a few more places.
Fantastic. Well, Google, moving on to another story, James, Google have bailed on its own Oculus Rift and HTC Vive competitor to focus on mobile VR. Now, Hot Hardware reported this week on a Recode article that Google have recently shut down the internal project that was working on this VR competitor to the high-end Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, to focus back on their kind of, it's their Google Cardboard replacement, which I think they're calling Daydream, which is like one up from Cardboard. It's got a bit more functionality and it's a bit better and it's got a bit more processing power, but it by no means is a high-end zero latency gaming rig. But they're not leaving VR totally. As I say, they're just going to focus on the smartphone capable version. Do you think, I mean, I must admit, I was not aware that Google were even had any plans to compete in the kind of pro level, did you?
The pro one, no, I wasn't aware, but I have to say I've tried a Gear VR, which is the Android version of virtual reality running in an Oculus Rift style kind of headset. And although it's not cutting edge graphics, it's still quite an interesting experience, and I think
that's the Samsung one.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they pull it off really well. So if Google can help its partners in that space, I think people who want a VR experience but don't have £5,000 in their pocket for a decent rig, I think that's a pretty good kind of stopgap solution.
Yeah, well, of course, I have not used an Oculus, and I haven't used the Vive from HTC. But every video I've seen on the internet of people using them say that it's an absolutely stellar experience, and then after 3 weeks they just stop using it. So I'm a bit concerned that the whole VR thing this year is a massive Techtasm.
I don't think it's quite ready. You're at the point whereby what do they say? The hype curve. I think we're currently at the height. The first peak of the hype curve. So
I think we're descending into the trough of despair fairly quickly, actually, because I think the issue, of course, with this hardware is that there isn't a massive bow wave of software following it. And without the software, you're just left with a hunk of junk. And also I'm not sure how long people can spend in VR these days without feeling a bit odd, weird, hot, queasy, or whatever.
It's funny you say that. I was at a meeting and we were doing a VR simulator for a fire truck, teaching how to drive trucks in busy situations. And the lady who was doing the demonstration did in fact feel ill and had to stop the simulation because she became very kind of disorientated. And this was a super kind of high-end, experience. So it's very interesting. I don't think it's for me, I'll be honest. All right, well, let's move on. So I think this is a first for this episode, my favourite website.
Is it Ars Technica?
It might be. It might well just be. Jonathan Gitlin is talking about how Uber have started to test self-driving cars, your favourite subject, in Pittsburgh, of all places. And I just imagine it. You call up your Uber and up it arrives and there's no driver there. But supposedly it knows where it's going. So, there's a lot of companies obviously working on the whole self-driving car thing. Tesla, of course, being a prominent one, and Google as well, and so forth. So what do you think of this as an interesting step for Uber?
Well, the picture of the car itself is, a regular Ford something or other, Mondeo, with a gigantic laser spinning, gun firing, turrets blasting sound speaker thingy attached to the roof. Some huge contraption which obviously provides the autonomous driving capability. I'm not surprised they're doing this, and they've clearly retrofitted an existing car. And are proudly driving around Pittsburgh. I understand that Pittsburgh is chosen because it's the most complicated place to drive. They've got curvy streets as well as blocks. They've got bridges. They've got one-way streets, and they've got the weather up there as well. Apparently.
So talk about jumping in at the deep end.
Well, yes. I mean, if you're going to solve the self-driving car problem, you can't do it in sunny California where there's never any rain and the sun shines all the time, because that's only half the story.
Yeah, this is true. It is really interesting. I can certainly see how it's going to work, but the one thing that, okay, maybe I'm just being a bit of an old fuddy-duddy here, technical term there, wouldn't it just be weird without a driver? I don't know. The idea of jumping in a car...
It's a Johnny cab.
You just don't know. A Johnny cab? What?
It's a Johnny cab from the movie Demolition Man.
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Is it Demolition? No, it's not Demolition Man. Which is it? It's that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It may be Demolition Man. Anyway, he gets into this cab at some point in the future, and it's a Johnny cab, and it's this futuristic-looking vehicle, and it's got a little spinny head with a bloke with a cap on it, and this sort of robot bloke sitting at the front with no driver, just this robot head on a stick. And he sort of swivels around and says to Arnie, hi, welcome to Johnny Cab. And then it's a self-driving car. So I think maybe it's halfway between getting into a car without a driver and getting into a car with a sort of blow-up head in the front seat, or something to say this is where the driver should sit, and to make you feel more comfortable, I've got a human head here.
I think that would probably work a lot better. I mean, Mercedes are talking about in the future having the front seats turned around so they face the back seats.
Well, that would make sense, wouldn't it, really? If you've been on those pods at Heathrow Terminal 5, you face inwards, don't you? So there's no driver as such. You're facing inward, like at least you can see the whites of the other people's eyes and see the fear and the sweat on their brow as they're being driven without a driver into oblivion. Yeah. At least there are tracks at Heathrow Terminal 5.
Yeah, this is true. I have to say that if I have to park at Heathrow, I try my hardest to park in the business parking just to go on that pod. But hey, perhaps that's just me.
It's Disneyland meets the airport.
Of course, absolutely. Hey, look, every high-flying executive wants that. Now, interestingly enough about this, though, the article does report that GM, that's General Motors, did invest $500 million in Uber's arch rival Lyft. That's LYFT, with, I guess, the same goal of developing self-driving taxis. So this is clearly something that the big players are looking towards.
Well, why would you employ a human to do it with all the kind of legal costs, human costs, and unreliability as well, compared to, because these self-driving systems are supposed to be more reliable than humans, when you could get a robot to do it? I mean, it just makes good sense. The real problem isn't going to be the technology. It's going to be people's acceptance of the technology.
Yes, but what they are saying, though, in this article is that the reality of a self-driving taxi is 2030 as a realistic target. So we're 14 years away. Considering autonomous vehicles are slowly making their way into the market, we've had lane-adjusting cars now for a couple of years. Autopilot from Tesla is becoming accepted. Yes, it's having a few problems, but generally it's fairly safe. I think 14 years' time, we'll be pretty accepting of the whole self-driving car thing.
I think so too. I mean, if you look at the technology that was around 14 years ago in 2002, it would be unrecognizable to today. I was in a naval yard this week, and somebody pulled out an old BlackBerry from their pocket with a little keyboard on the front, and the phone was miniature. I mean, it was the size of the palm of his hand. It was absolutely tiny. We're used to these gigantic 5-6 inch phones now, and we think that's normal. But back in, and that was only a few years ago, that you could buy these absolutely miniature phones. And of course, you forget that technology waxes and wanes, and people very quickly accept the touch interface in a big phone is the thing to have, and it doesn't look odd.
Yeah, no, this is very true. Well, in a similar kind of vein to Uber, Elon Musk unveiled his second master plan, and if you're
the Mad Musk has struck again.
He has, and I was in fact reading his first master plan from 10 years ago, when the Tesla Roadster, that Lotus car that was converted to electric, was a thing. And he was talking about how they were going to use the profits from the Roadster to create a family car. They were going to use the profits from that to create a slightly cheaper family car. And, fast forward 10 years and crikey, he's done it. So what's really interesting about the second master plan is I think people will actually take him seriously. And the second master plan hinges on, if you're a Tesla owner, when you're sitting at home watching the TV, your car can double as a taxi and thus reduce the cost of ownership.
Ah, so it goes out and makes money for you while you're at work.
So you're technically a pimp. So
we all become taxi companies.
That's basically the idea.
We all become Johnny Cab owners.
Yep. Yes, exactly. And that's really interesting. But I'm at risk of swearing here, and I know our listener is quite sensitive. But when I first heard about this, I thought to myself, well, what if somebody goes out and uses my car, gets drunk and pisses on the back seat, and comes back? But what happens then? What happens in that situation? Because today, if that happens, it's the responsibility of the taxi company to sort it all out. And, who's driving my car? It just seems a bit weird,
Well, you effectively, it's not your car. You're renting somebody else's car. We'd all just use Ubers. It's a bit silly, this, quite honestly, because in a world of self-driving cars, where transport is almost instantly available everywhere on an app or by phoning somebody and it just turns up. Who the hell's going to own a car? You're not, are you? I mean, you could order something up from a shop and have them put it in the back of any old electric car and come and deliver it to your house on demand. I mean, we would take humans off the road. And in fact, that's where it will go. I think there will be parts of roads or parts of road networks that are set aside for purely autonomous vehicles to do their own thing, because I don't think people are going to be comfortable. People who've got autonomous cars won't be comfortable putting them on roads with mad human drivers, and vice versa. Human drivers will take the mickey out of self-driving cars. So I think we're going to get this kind of new mode of transportation, which is autonomous cars driving on their own part of the road network. I was in Turkey a couple of years ago, and coming from the airport to the office that I was going to, I actually, the taxi was driving along this big road towards the Bosphorus, and running down the middle of the road, about 3 lanes wide, was a bus, a regular bus with regular wheels. It was an articulated bus, so it was in 2 halves, but it was being driven down this sort of, I guess you would call it sort of a concrete channel which had been made for the bus. So it was a normal bus, petrol bus, with people on it driving sort of on a railway track. It was on its own kind of system. Wow. And the driver was there. I don't know whether he was steering or not, or whether the bus was steering itself. It was kind of an autonomous thing, doing its thing and moving quite fast compared to the rest of the traffic flow. So it was sort of like building a train without building a train, if you see what I mean. And that's how that's the sort of network I envisage for electric cars, is this kind of separate road network just for the electric cars to do their thing.
So we're almost kind of going back to trains then.
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going. But hundreds, thousands, millions of trains, tiny trains, just big enough for 5 people.
That's really incredible.
Do you know what I've just described? It's the pod system at Heathrow Terminal 5.
It is. We've gone back to the pods.
We're back to the pods.
That is. That is fantastic.
What else did he say in his master plan?
He's also thinking about the idea that we're all going to be generating our own energy through, I guess, solar. So the electric vehicles can be effectively self-sustaining through the solar on your...
Well, that can only work if you've got some way, because I'm out all day. When I bring my electric car home, I'm charging off the grid because I don't, my solar energy, which is available during the day, is not available at night. So how's he going to address that?
Well, yeah, but they have announced and brought out the big battery thing for exactly that problem, right? So it's almost like the Apple model, though. Everything's great if you buy things with the fruit on it. So,
it's very clearly he's following the same principle, I think, when it comes to branding. And
absolutely. So the problem that you've got and you've just described could be solved with a Tesla product, right?
I'm not bought into the Tesla ecosystem. We've talked about this before. I think his cars carry too many batteries, too much weight of batteries to be green. And certainly it is very walled garden. The Tesla, what are they called? The superchargers are just for Tesla folk. There's no interoperability with other cars. No other type of car is allowed there. So it's sort of like a club thing going on. I just wonder, he said that he also wants to expand the electric vehicle product line to address all major segments. So I know that Model 3 is his first attempt at a mass market car. But potentially he's talking there in that goal, part 2 of his master plan, to actually address smaller segment sizes as well, which would mean, how would that work with the Tesla Supercharger Club, which is clearly for the people that have spent £100,000 buying one now.
Well, what do you think to the idea, though, of the second master plan, though? Do you think Musk has hit it on the head?
No, I think he's a nutter. The problem, I'll tell you the issue is, that he basically carried out his first master plan to the letter and did it. So the whole market, it's like the Emperor's New Clothes. And now saying, well, he did it once, therefore he's probably going to do this stuff again.
But that's the way investors work, though, isn't it?
I understand, yeah.
You've had a successful business. You can walk into a bank and went, I built Facebook, and just look at $1 billion flying your way. I mean, so Musk is clearly, like Warren Buffett, a bankable character now. So, hey, let's see. I think
he's a bankable character as long as he keeps banking it. And I think that you got to remember that he struggled to raise cash initially because of his bonkers barking ideas.
Hey, look, he did it. He did it.
I think he's going to struggle with these goals as well. And I think he's got laudable goals, and I think he certainly knows nothing about risk or taking risk, and just doesn't care whether he loses it all. Which means,
to be honest, the world needs Elon Musk, and he may be crazy, but you've got to admit he has brought electric cars to the masses. Even if they are unaffordable, people kind of try and build up to owning a Tesla, just the same as what Steve Jobs did with the iPhone. So I think, fair play to him. And he may not be the person to succeed, but he'll certainly change a few norms in the process. So
he will. Doesn't stop it being a Techtasm, though.
Oh, there we go.
Well, James, that is it for this week. Listeners, you can find us at facebook.com/Techtasm, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher or Feedburner, and contact us at feedback@techtasm.com. And remember, if you want to give us stars, that is helpful. If you don't, sod ya. Well, we record every Tuesday at 2100 BST GMT, which is why this show is being recorded on a Friday night. And I'm not sure we're going to have a show next week, are we, James?
Why not?
Well, because there'll be no news. By the time it comes around on Tuesday, there'll only been a couple of days. Nothing will have happened.
Since when have we recorded on Tuesday?
Yeah, exactly. At some point next week, there will be another episode, possibly. But for this one, this is me, Sir Robin Yellow.
And me, James Woodall.
Asking you, the listener, the question. Is it real, or is it just a Techtasm?